Hello, welcome back. Today we're understanding the spectrum of athletes and performance. Each sport comes with different physical demands, and because of that, athletes come in all kinds of different shapes and sizes. Here is a picture of a number of top athletes, Olympic caliber athletes, professional athletes. And what I hope you can see when you're looking at these top athletes is diverse body shapes and sizes. There is no one body shape or size that is ideal for sports. Sports people come in all kinds of different shapes and sizes. And because of that, there are very specific requirements for each person. Every nutrition plan needs to be individualized. Let's look at some of the energy systems, the body's energy systems, and how that influences the nutritional choices that we'll need to make for a variety of different sports. Now, there are three primary energy systems. The first energy system that is tapped into is the phosphagen system. This comes with phosphocreatine, and it lasts around 10 seconds. Beyond about 10 seconds, you're starting to tap into some of your other energy systems. But for explosive speed and explosive power, like lifting weights, you're going to need to optimize your phosphagen system with phosphocreatine. Between 10 seconds and up to 1 to 2 minutes, your anaerobic system kicks in. And that's a glycolytic system where you're starting to metabolize glucose and break it down into lactic acid. Lactic acid is also a fuel. But lactic acid will dramatically rise in the first 1 to 2 minutes of anaerobic exercise because oxygen delivery cannot keep up with the rate of metabolism of glucose that's going on. Now, beyond about 1 to 2 minutes, you start to enter the aerobic phase of using fuels in your body. This can last for many hours. Here you're burning both carbohydrates and fats depending on how fast you're going. A lot of sports fall into this category. So what are the types of sports and the demands based on those energy systems? First of all, there's aerobic sports. Here we go. Aerobic sports where we're burning glucose, we need to improve our lactic acid tolerance, and we need to improve our fat metabolism. This is for long events lasting more than about 2 to 5 minutes in length, and this can be up to hours and even days for ultra-endurance events of exercise. Anaerobic activities, on the other hand, like explosive sprinting or weight training, anything that has really explosive energy in under 10 seconds, does use glucose and lactic acid, so these two are important, but the big energy system that we're going to focus on is the phosphocreatine system, and you want to optimize use of your phosphocreatine. Of course, most sports are a mixture. They require some explosive force elements and also some endurance elements. Mixed sports like basketball or soccer, for example, you need to optimize glucose metabolism, lactic acid metabolism, you need to optimize fat metabolism, and you need to have phosphocreatine at its peak as well, so you can put in explosive sprints. So let's take a look at those. Breakdown of those sports. So here are some examples of aerobic sports. Aerobic sports include things like cycling, many hours in length, long distance swimming or triathlon, and running. These are all aerobic sports which require you to optimize glucose metabolism and fat metabolism. So an example of extreme aerobic sport would be cycling the Tour de France. You can see here Tour de France cyclists, the number of calories that need to be burned over 3 weeks of the Tour de France are extreme. Tour de France cyclists will burn up to about 8,000 kilocalories per day. And here that's expressed as cheeseburgers. You can see that the number of cheeseburgers an average participant in the Tour de France requires just to get through that sporting event is around 400 cheeseburgers over a 3-week period. It's incredible extreme energy use. And in fact, most cyclists during the Tour de France cannot keep up with their caloric requirements and will start to lose weight dramatically and eventually will become sick and underperform. So let's take a look at these aerobic sports. Distance running. Typically, distance runners are running between 60 and 140 miles per week in training. That's at least 10 to 20 hours of training. Cycling, 300 to 400 miles per week, at least 10 to 20 hours of cycling. Cross-country skiing, 10 to 20 hours of skiing. Swimming, 30 to 90,000 yards per week, depending on the kind of swimmer you are. Again, 10 to 20 hours. And triathlon, again, 10 to 20 hours of training. Now, there are some athletes who will go even higher, up to 40 hours of training per week. But typically, 10 to 20 hours of aerobic training is what you'll see for endurance sports. Now, anaerobic sports like boxing, again, you'll see 10 to 20 hours of training. Sprinting, especially the 100 meters and short sprint events, or cycling sprinting, or sprinting and swimming. Very high intensity work, but again, athletes train 10 to 20 hours. Powerlifting, weight training, physical conditioning, again, 10 to 20 hours. And some of the field events, explosive energy requiring field events like long jump or pole vault or high jump or the hammer throw, the shot put. Again, these are power events. But again, athletes will still train 10 to 20 hours per week, a lot of that time in the weights room. Now, mixed sports require both elements of endurance and power. Now, mixed sports will include things like baseball, soccer, or basketball, and so on. When we look at some of these sports, like soccer, for example, athletes will often mix the types of training they do. They'll do weight training, they'll do runs, they'll do sprints, long distance aerobic runs and sprints. Again, 10 to 20 hours of training is typical. Baseball, will do low intensity drills, there'll be high intensity sprints, there'll be weight training, might be some plyometric work. Again, 10 to 20 hours of training. Football, weight training and physical conditioning runs, again, 10 to 20 hours for most college athletes. And then events like sports like dance, ballet, tennis, golf, lacrosse. Again, these are mixed sports where physical conditioning will include both weight training and aerobic training. Again, athletes are looking to be doing 10 to 20 hours of training per week. So some of these sports have been followed. For example, here is an analysis looking at a mixed sport like soccer. This was during the Women's World Cup of France. This data was collected during the World Cup in 2019. On average, professional soccer players in this World Cup run 10 kilometers every game. When they break down that running by zones, there's a slow, 1, 2, 3, and then faster, 4, and zone 5 sprinting. You can see that on average, around 90% of the time of most players in most positions is spent running at fairly low speeds, 3 or below. However, midfielders and forwards are often sprinting up to about 14% of the time they spend on the field are in anaerobic sprints. So you need both elements of sprinting here and long distance running, because a 10-kilometer run is a long distance aerobic run. In terms of caloric needs, the energy needs for professional soccer players, typically over the course of a week, a professional soccer player is going to need between 3,000 and 5,000 calories every single day. Now, the number of calories they need depends on the work that they're doing that day. So if they're training, regular training, around 3,000 calories is what an English Premier League soccer player will require. But on game days, you can see that climbs to 4,500, nearly 5,000 calories, just to support their training and the game days. So what do we need to know? We need to know that there is a spectrum of athletes, different kinds of athletes, athletes that are doing aerobic sports, athletes that are doing explosive resistance sports, and athletes that are doing mixed sports. Aerobic, anaerobic, and mixed sports. So when we're creating nutrition plan for athletes, we need to take this into account. We need to understand what the event is, how often per week they're playing their sport, how often they're training, their goals, any practical and nutritional challenges, some preferences here for different kinds of foods, food tolerances, foods that you can eat and can't eat, and also individual responses. One of the most crucial things about developing your own personalized nutritional strategy is to understand your body and listen to your body. If you eat a food and you feel lethargic, if you feel that it doesn't agree with you, then that's something that you should pay attention to, and something that you should reduce or minimize in your diet. Now, there's been a lot of debate about carbohydrates recently, and there's this sort of fight out there that has been going on. Should athletes be on high-carb diets or low-carb diets, or should they swap between high-carb and low-carb diets? Well, in fact, a moderate carbohydrate diet is probably the best. Around 50% of your kilocalories coming from carbohydrates is the healthiest number. Now, some athletes will go higher than this 50% of calories from carbohydrates, particularly during competition phase. When you're in competition, you'll need to start to go to higher carbohydrate numbers to support your competition. But the data is pretty clear. Low carbohydrate diets are not sustainable for most athletes, and in fact will reduce performance. So moderate to high carbohydrate diets, moderate carbohydrate diets for most training days, and high carbohydrate diets on competition and race days is what is currently recommended. How do we know that? There have been many studies that have looked at low carbohydrate diets and performance. Here you can see some of those studies. Helga, Fleming, Zajac, and others have shown that the performance decreases on low carbohydrate diets. So, when I'm talking about carbohydrates per day, if your activity is a light activity, low intensity training, you're going to need about 3 to 5 grams of carbohydrate per kilogram of body weight per day. Moderate exercise, at least 1 hour per day, you're going to need 5 to 7 grams of carbohydrates per kilogram of body weight per day. High intensity training, 1 to 3 hours of moderate to high intensity training, you're going to need between 6 and 10 grams of carbohydrate per kilogram per day. In very, very high intensity days, this would be competition days, an athlete may need between 8 and 12 grams of carbohydrate per kilogram of body weight per day. Those are the fueling needs in terms of carbohydrates for most athletes. We'll go into the types of carbohydrates that are required later in this course. Let's take a look at the common myth. One common myth is that athletes do not suffer from cardiovascular disease or chronic diseases like diabetes. This is an absolute myth. Athletes, while they are somewhat protected from cardiovascular disease and somewhat protected from diabetes, exercise is not a cure-all. In fact, athletes do have lower rates of cardiovascular disease, they do have lower rates of diabetes, but athletes can certainly suffer from chronic diseases like cardiovascular disease, heart attacks, and diabetes. So it's really important to look after your health first, and by being healthy, you'll be able to train at your best and perform at your best for the longest possible time. You want to be able to extend your longevity of your sporting career. And here I want to give you an example. This example is Tim O'Donnell, professional Ironman athlete, one of the top Ironman athletes in the world. Unfortunately, his family history predisposes him to cardiovascular disease, and a lot of Ironman athletes make the mistake of choosing diets that are high in fat, wrongly assuming that it will improve their fat metabolism and improve their Ironman endurance performance. It does not improve Ironman endurance performance and does place athletes, even elite athletes like Tim O'Donnell, at risk of heart attack and stroke. Let's take a look at Tim O'Donnell here.
It's been a while since you've seen me out in the race course. A lot of people are starting to wonder where I've been at. My last race was Challenge Miami in March, and I've been a little bit of a ghost, a little bit on the sideline since. Well, it turns out I actually had a heart attack during the race at Challenge Miami, and this is the story of that event. As Big Mets would say, hammer drop. It's going to be a lot more fun, a little more technical. I didn't wake up till 9:30.
Thanks everybody for tuning in. We'll catch you next time.
Kill me, Bob.
Tim T.O. O'Donnell.
The likes of Tim O'Donnell, you can see him there.
I do think Tim's in a bit of a rough patch.
Thinking that he's done.
Come on, smooth. Keep.
Likes of the calf race, Tim O'Donnell.
He's digging so deep.
Definitely one of the most
This is going to want this cap when I get up.
Releasing some of the pain.
We'll stop the show and finish it up.
About a bit not having a dad. It's hard.
There you have it. Tim O'Donnell, professional Ironman athlete, person that trains between 20 and 40 hours a week, had a heart attack and was extremely lucky to survive. He's still alive today, thanks to the intervention of doctors that placed a stent in his heart to open up the blockage that was caused by a high-fat diet. So again, I just want to reiterate, it's really important to balance your diet as an athlete. Even if you're a high-level professional athlete, you need to balance your diet to protect yourself from chronic diseases like cardiovascular disease, heart attacks, stroke, and diabetes. So when we're talking nutrition, I would really like you to focus on performance and not body shape. You can see all of these elite athletes, these top-level athletes, these professional athletes have different body shapes, different body sizes. Don't look at others. Try to avoid body image issues. Try to focus on your performance. Your body will adapt to your exercise, and your body will become the best possible version of itself if you focus on fueling your body correctly with a well-balanced diet to improve your sporting performance. Thank you.